Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Raven. Our guest today is Dr. Eli Joseph. He's an author, educator, and three-time TEDx speaker who currently serves as a faculty member at Columbia University, New York University, and UCLA. Using rejection to fuel his professional achievements, and I'm excited to talk about that today. Dr. Joseph earned his bachelor's degree at age 20, his master's at 21, and a doctorate from Felician University while teaching at Columbia at the age of 24. So, wow, that's a lot of achievement in 24 years. So you would wonder where the rejection enters into it. But Eli is author of a book, The Perfect Rejection Resume, A Reader's Guide to Building a Career Through Failure. So Eli, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm excited to talk to you. There's a lot to talk about. And again, listeners might be thinking, man, all I hear about is success coming from Eli, right?
Yeah, I mean, most people, and that was basically the motivation of writing this book, because I remember someone saying, I must have a silver spoon in my mouth. Everything has been handed to me, and everything came easy for me. And that was the perfect rejection resume. It came about because I wanted to show the readers and the audience that my path to where I'm at right now is nothing short of just a perfect glide, to success. So I wanted to show and prove, but not only that, just encourage people to share their rejection resumes, share their failures as well, because it provides this form of vaccination, if you will. It's this vaccination where you do feel as though, okay, if I'm getting rejected, the worst that can happen is I just hear a no. I get rejected, and that's that. I can just move on. And that was basically the genesis of the book, The Perfect Rejection Resume. And then I also motivated, and challenged people, just write down your resume, write down your as if you're writing your resume, but instead of highlighting your highlights, I want you to highlight your lowlights as well. So that was it. And I have a ton of rejections and failures that I can even talk about. We can even have a whole entire conversation about my failures and rejection. But that was basically the genesis of just not only highlighting my highlights, but just sharing my lowlights as well.
Well, you're in the right place. So I'm glad you're here, and we're going to come back and talk about the book. Now, not all failure or rejection maybe is the result of a mistake, but I'm not going to let you off the hook, at least in terms of the question we ask everybody here. The different things that you've done, different stages of your work and career. Can you choose? What would you say is, if not the favorite mistake, what's a favorite mistake?
A favorite mistake, believe it or not, I have to go back, and I'm going back about maybe since 2015, actually, January 2015. I'll never forget this day. It was an interview, it's an internship interview for the e-trading desk at JPMorgan Chase, and I was stoked, excited. My first interview, I'm green, I'm excited and stoked about this opportunity, and I remember vividly, I was asked this question. It's a typical common question that I was asked by the hiring managers. What do you want to do, or where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I was asked that question, and that question, the answer to that question is subjective, right? So I didn't think anything of it. I wanted to become a corporate investment banker. That was basically within the e-trading desk as well. That was a major division at JPMorgan. So I did express my interest in becoming an investment banker one day, 5 years. I want to grow within the company. And I thought that was a brilliant answer, and it was a truthful answer as well.
Yeah.
The response to it, that's where I'm getting at as far as the mistake that I made. The hiring manager told me, that is great that you aspire to, to become an investment banker, but investment bankers at JPMorgan, this is what he said. The investment bankers at JPMorgan, we typically hire interns from your Penn Whartons, your Harvard Business School, your Columbia University, your NYU Stearns. We tend to hire from a pool of guys that are coming from the business school there. And unfortunately for me, I didn't go to those schools. I didn't go to the school. I went to a CUNY school at Queens College, and I was facing academic probation. So I didn't even want to express that. But my favorite mistake came from that point, because now, fast forward to today, I'm teaching at Columbia. I'm teaching at NYU. I'm teaching at UCLA. I'm holding courses and workshops at various institutions that are prominent, that are quote unquote prestige, or I'll say prestige in parentheses.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was my favorite mistake. My favorite mistake was, and that was basically the beginning of my failures. And I didn't get the job, by the way. So that was
Yeah.
one of my favorite mistakes that I made.
So it sounds like the mistake was wanting that job or thinking that was the path you wanted. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes. I say the clear mistake that came from that experience was not being prepared, or not being,
Uh,
I guess not being prepared in the sense of not getting those experiences at those said universities, or not attending those said universities, or that was my favorite. That was my mistake, because not only would it's a twofold answer or point of view that I'd like to point out.
mhm.
Not only was it didn't shape my my trajectory to become an investment banker that I would like to be, but at the same time, it provides this sense of selectivity for these universities, right? And and it's a dilemma here. At Queens College, you can consider yourself a big fish out of a small pond,
Mhm.
but at these schools, like an MIT or a Harvard, you're amongst the giants as well. So that mistake came from not only not being amongst those giants here
Yeah.
as a student, but um, fast forward to today, the tables have turned.
Yeah.
Now I'm teaching those same students that are applying for those universities, that are applying for these internship programs as well. So
Yeah.
it basically it turns a complete 180 here from the rejection that time, me growing up, or me attending and having high aspirations, to me continuing to have this high aspirations, but a different focus here.
Yeah. So, gosh. So it sounds like you're happier than you might have been as an investment banker.
Yes, yes, I'm happier, and it's funny because I actually did. It's funny when I graduated with my master's degree, I did try my hand on Wall Street, and I did it last 6 months.
Hmm.
And it's partly because I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
I didn't really have it. I lost my passion for it, and once I stepped out and I stepped into academia and I stepped into healthcare and different avenues, I'm like, man, I'm much more happy
Yeah.
outside. I'm free,
Yeah.
and I'm not only that. I'm basically partnering with investment bank. I'm still in that realm, but I'm in a different capacity where I don't have to, boil down and do those 90-hour work weeks, and
Right.
be go down and do the work here as well. I could just become a partner and an advisor, and work with them in that aspect as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes me wonder. I mean, so why did they bring you in for the interview? They could read your resume and not see the names of those schools, and like, why bring in Eli just to chastise you for not being from quote unquote the right schools? Like, were they really giving you a fair shot?
I don't think so. I don't think, and you could tell from the interview there you was not gonna get that job or that opportunity. Me being, I didn't know, I'm naive. I didn't know at the time. I was excited regardless whether or not they was going to hire me. I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to
Yeah.
be here. And I didn't realize it until after I did the interview, and I reflect on the interview, and I'm like, man, I don't think I'll get the job, because
Yeah.
they were hard on me. They were hard about my experience at Queens College and my aspirations and what am I doing as far as majoring in mathematics, and they were drilling me as far as
Yeah.
my resume. But I didn't mind. I just wanted to experience that feel of being inside of a bank, and my first time here, and I just wanted to be excited to be here, and I was excited. And at the same time, I was just soaking it all in, but I didn't realize that I was making mistakes along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, to each their own, to decide a career path or a profession, or at least a job where people maybe work for a bank for a few years. They can put up with the long hours and the stress, and then go move on to something else. A lot of people do that. I mean, you grew up in New York, right?
Yes.
I mean, I grew up in suburban Detroit. I didn't know what investment banking was, right? I mean, I was surrounded by the automotive industry and some other industries. Like, I had no idea what that was. I went to grad school, and then I met a lot of people who, I don't know if they grew up wanting to be investment bankers, or at some point in early adulthood, they learned like, hey, that's a place you can make a lot of money. That's a prestigious job in a lot of circles. And I'm like, wait, huh? What? Well, I mean, I could spell investment banker, but I couldn't tell you anything about what they did. So I don't know. I never felt regret like not wanting to do that. And I've found a path. It seems like you found, or you're, I guess never always finding the path forward, right?
Yes. It's funny that you point that out. I actually spoke to, it was around 2017, actually, a few years afterwards, and I was speaking to an investment banker. He was a corporate lawyer at Goldman Sachs, and at the time I was still excited to work there, or work in Wall Street, and he was honest. He had this candid conversation. He was like, "Dude, I don't know why you want to get in here. I want to get out. I want to get out. I want to get out of here." And
Yeah.
a few months later, he left. He left and went into consulting, and he got out of that industry as well, and he ended up doing his own thing. So I think right now, what we're doing is basically trying to refocus and reshape the way that we view things, or we view success.
Mm-hmm.
It's not all about just getting this prestigious job at a prestigious firm now.
Yeah.
It's also about being happy for yourself and being happy and being able to help others as well, and in your way, and doing it at your viewpoint, at your own pace.
Yeah. So that rejection for that internship, that's one of the rejections on your personal rejection resume?
Yes, one of many, one of thousands, one of thousands of rejections. I think at JPMorgan alone, I think that was my favorite firm that I would like to work at. I applied there about, if I'm not mistaken, about 600 times.
Hmm.
And I've applied there 600 times. I've gotten called for an interview about 5 times, and I had no offers.
Yeah.
That was one of many of the rejections that I've faced, and I'm basically immune to it at this point.
Yeah.
It's funny because when I send out pitches, or when I send out applications or nominations, I kind of know, okay, you know what, I'm gonna shoot my shot here, but
Mm-hmm.
if I get rejected, so what? It's just I was added another tally on my resume as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got to try. I mean, there's the old Wayne Gretzky quote, I think of you, or is he? I don't know. There was a scene in The Office, right? Michael Scott's quoting Wayne Gretzky. I don't know if Gretzky really said this, something like, "You miss all the shots you never take."
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And at some point, you've got to try. I mean, it seems like I'm almost 50. I'm turning 50 this year. So like when I was applying to colleges, coming out of high school in 1991, these were all paper documents, paper applications. Like they were all unique, and it was a lot of effort. So you had to kind of pick and choose, like, all right, these are the schools, this limited number that I'm going to apply to. Well, now it seems like it's online, it's electronic, standardized application, and you can blast out your application to so many more colleges, which then it seems like, well, then, like, what's the pain in trying? I mean, like back in the day, you would pay. There was a fee. Like, is that still happening, or is it a really low fee, or it just gets blasted out with
it's a low
charge?
fee. It's a low fee now. If colleges are actually providing that fee, or providing that requirement here, I think now, to your point, the Common Application is one of the major applications that we're using.
Yeah.
And to your point, you're basically sending out a mass amount of in one click. You're just sending out a mass amount of applications here, and it leads to my point here that we were discussing here. I was discussing with a colleague of mine about the illusion of prestige and selectivity. More and more, it's an illusion now, because more and more colleges are having lower amount of the acceptance rates are even lower.
Right.
And people may think it's harder to get into those universities, but it's not. It's just that these universities are receiving more applications than they were likely.
Yeah.
And the capacity of admission is the same. It's the same, or even at a slower rate. So it's easier now to apply.
Yeah.
And it's a good and a bad thing. It's easier to apply. It's just that, are you able to get punched in the face and get rejected more so than not? That's the question that you have to face yourself.
There's more opportunities to get that rejection. And yeah, I was fooled by that for a while. My alma mater, you see the acceptance rates are really low, the rejection rates are really high. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, it's not an apples to apples comparison. Things have changed. Maybe I still could have gotten in where thankfully I wanted to get in. But I'll tell you though, when I was graduating, from college, 1995, applying for jobs was also a very paper-based process. Like either people came on campus, companies came on campus, or you mailed out letters with a resume, and companies would actually physically mail back a rejection letter more often than not. And for some reason, I don't know where the term came from. Like people I knew, and they called them bullet letters. I guess probably because you've been shot down. But I was thinking about your book and rejection resumes, and I couldn't help remember. I was hanging those rejection letters with a kind of a sense of pride. I was hanging them on the door where at the building I lived in, and they filled up the door and then went down into the hallway. That was my way, I guess, of dealing with rejection, or just at least trying to. I don't know. It's kind of like, yeah, well, fine, okay, they didn't want me. Well, fine, I'll find something. I guess was part of the mindset there.
Yeah, and it's funny because people have different mindsets. I think I had a similar mindset where you can hang them up, where you have it's not considered the wall of shame per se, but I had a different mindset where it's like I have a hit list. It's more I have a hit list here where I have companies that rejected me. And I can either go back for another opportunity. This is where I ended up at Columbia. I don't hold grudges against organizations that have rejected me in the past, right? However, I just keep a note, right? I don't forget about them. I just keep a note, and it's a hit list, because I always believe that in the feeling of serendipity, those companies will hear from me again in some way, shape, or form. That's when I reapplied for a teaching role at Columbia, and I eventually got in. At JPMorgan, I'm basically connecting the dots and doing workshops with them as well, in various spaces in education and quantitative finance. So I'm basically getting my hit back from those rejections, but I don't hold grudges to the point where I'm bashing each and every company. I'm like, forget you, screw all of you guys that reject. Because if I do that, then, at this point, my rejection resume is pretty lengthy here. Yeah. If I bash every company, then, who's going to provide me an opportunity at some way, shape, or form here?
Yeah.
So we have a different way of coping with rejection. It's just a matter of what makes you feel comfortable.
Yeah. And I'm not surprising Eli with this, because I did mention when we had talked previously before recording here today. I'm going to tell the story of how I learned of Eli. So one of my guests here, I forget what episode number, Genesis Amaris Kemp, then invited me to be on her podcast. And as I was checking that out and seeing what her podcasts were, Eli had been a guest there. And I thought, oh, rejection resume, dealing with rejection and trying to be, positive and building on it, moving forward. I would love to have him on the podcast. And as I told Eli, I put in a message through the website, the contact form. I never heard back. And I thought, well, he's busy. He's doing stuff. I wasn't upset rejected, but I'm like, oh, I got rejected by Eli. But now your side of the story, though.
I never got it. I never got the email. But here's one thing I'll say. Here's one thing I'll say that you put me on the spot here. Here's one thing I'll say. No response is a response. No response is a response. So unfortunately, even if I never got it, it's a form of rejection. But I said this before to Mark. I said, I'm so happy that it worked out here.
Right.
Better late than never. I'm happy it all worked out. But I'll say this to the viewers, sometimes you send something out and it may, the message may go to spam or may go to junk. The receiver or the intended person for that message may not have gotten it.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's all right. You just move on, and you once again you will hear from that person again.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't hold a grudge.
Yeah.
Because then a PR firm had reached out. I recognize, oh, right. Yeah, Eli. Yeah, that would be awesome. So here, I'm glad it worked out. That's all.
Exactly. It's once again, you don't have to hold a grudge. It's more so of knowing that you will hear from that person again. And it's all about destiny and chance as well.
Yeah. So I think one level of trying to process rejection or think through it personally, but then there's this notion of this practice of sharing rejections publicly, whether it was on my wall in the fraternity house or you doing it online or other people doing it online? Why share rejections publicly?
It's radical in my opinion, but I'll say this: what more to share your failures than you? Who will share your failures at some point in your life? You will have to share your failures. You have to be vulnerable and be able to confide in your community and share the way that your process. It wasn't an easy process, right? But it's comfortable. It's comfortable for you to say, you know what? I'm just gonna get that nudge off my back. I'm gonna get that monkey off my back and just share my thoughts and share my rejection. And then it provides this a unique conversation amongst your community, and it will motivate people to say, I failed here too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I failed, and I learned from that process, and it's a learning process as well. It's unique, and most people don't feel comfortable sharing the way that they failed and their rejections here. But it's more so of saying, you know what, I failed, and I want to be brave enough to share my failures here, and perhaps someone may feel that same way. They'll have that same conviction to share their story as well.
Yeah.
So it's radical, but it works. It works, and it's funny because everyone loves a comeback story.
Yeah.
And the majority of the stories that go viral or the statuses that go viral on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, the failure stories, the stories that you have to bounce back or rebound, those are the stories that really get the audience attention here. And I always encourage people to share your rejection resumes. Share your failures here. It's easier.
Yeah, and it emphasizes the idea we all fail, we all make mistakes. That's the spirit of this podcast, is successful people like you and other guests coming on and reminding others, hey, we all make mistakes, we're all human, learn from them, right? If you can focus on learning instead of beating yourself up, that's a better path forward, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think is another one of a mistake that I make. We're so focused on what we're trying to do, or whether it's going to a specific industry that we're excited about. And sometimes that it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. I was so focused on finance and Wall Street, and it didn't work out. And being rejected so many times will prove to me that, you know what, I think it's time to focus on something else and other things. You may come back around, you may come back to banking or finance, but just focus on other things. Share your ideas, share your story, and then you never know.
And you used the word vaccinated earlier, and you've used that in other articles and interviews that you've done. I mean, traditionally vaccination, correct me if I'm wrong, like you're being exposed to a small amount of like a dead version of a flu virus or what have you, and that small exposure then allows your body to react to a bigger exposure. I like the analogy, right? But how do you make sure that vaccination, that little bit of exposure prevents a large exposure that might make you sick, to extend that analogy, right?
At some point, you're going to succeed. At some point, as you get vaccinated with an extra dose of failure or rejection, at some point you're going to get a win, right? You're going to get a win at some point, and this is where you will say to yourself, okay, you know what? I'm not going to be completely exposed here to failure. I'm going to continue to take that dose just so I can move forward. But as I continue to push through, I'm going to have a win. I'm going to get a win at some point.
Yeah.
So, as I'm shooting my shots and I'm missing, something's going to drop soon. And this is one principle that I shared in the book here. There's two principles that I like to share. The first one is rent is due every day. Rent is due every single day. And the effort that you put in is your currency.
Yeah.
You're paying your landlord. You're paying your landlord every single day. And as you know, rent is due every day, whether you succeed or whether you fail. At least you put that effort in. At least you put in that rent, right? And then the next principle that I would like to point out is that direction is much more important than speed. We heard that before. Right? And as we know, when you are heading in the right direction, you know that it's much more greater to go there at a slower rate than go the wrong way at a faster rate.
Yeah.
So as you are continuously getting rejected, and as you continuously accumulating failure, you realize that you're learning from your mistakes, and some way, shape, or form, you're going to get a win.
Yeah. And I guess the question sometimes then is, do failures, rejections, or mistakes help us course correct to make better progress in that direction? Or does it prompt us to change direction? It sounds like your rejection for the iBanking job led to a new direction, not figuring out how to get accepted for the next banking job. I mean, it's hard to know how that's going to end up playing out, or what the best is. It a change in direction, or getting back on track with that direction? How do we know?
That's great. That's a good question. And here's one thing I would like to point out. You hear from this podcast first, right? We talked about the rejection vaccination, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll focus on rejection AI, or rejection generator. It's more so a rejection GPT, where you are course correcting, you're recalibrating yourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're recalibrating yourself, whether you're going the same direction. You can try 100 times within the same direction, or you can figure something out in another direction and then come back to it, right? Yeah. This is where you're recalibrating yourself, and you're recalibrating your interests as well, and figuring out whether or not you would like to move forward, right? And or go in another direction. So it all depends on, how comfortable you are proceeding, right? Yeah. And I think with that point, with that machine learning tactic, or the deep learning process here, you can recalibrate your losses or your failures onto the same direction within the industry, or another direction here.
Yeah. So our guest again today, Dr. Eli Joseph. The book is The Perfect Rejection Resume, a reader's guide to building a career through failure. Building on your vaccination analogy, like we could almost nowadays show, like, here's my rejection vaccination card. How many boosters? How many rejection boosters did I get?
That is true. Yeah, it's not only boost. Yeah, in my case, it's going to be a lot of boosters. Your case as well is going to be a lot of booster shots of rejection, of being able to not being humble in a sense, but it's also being humble as well. But being able to say, you know what, I succeeded, but I've came a long way.
Yeah,
I came a long way.
Yeah, and I think there's an art to when you have to give a rejection, when you have to reject somebody, of doing it in a kind way, right? So back to the idea of, you miss all the shots you never take. There's times I'll reach out to fairly high profile people because I saw something about mistakes in a quote or something. And hey, it doesn't take that long. I try to craft a very short, personalized message through their website or an email. And maybe the website messages just don't get through for technical or organizational reasons. Some intern hits delete or something. You never know. But okay, fine. I can live with that. William Shatner, who had an amazing quote about, he's 90 something now. He'd been in space. He's reflecting. There was some great quote, a recent quote about learning from mistakes. And so I reached out through his website and I sent a message. About 2 days later, it wasn't directly from him. I got the kindest, nicest rejection email, like to the point where I want to print it out and frame it and put it on the wall. Like, it was so gracious about, oh, Mr. Shatner really appreciates the invitation, and he doesn't go on anybody's podcasts unless it's a close friend or there's a business relationship, or like he's promoting something, I guess. And but anyway, like I felt better about him by getting the rejection than I would have thought of William Shatner beforehand.
Yeah, some people and the thing is, some people are much more personable with rejecting, because it's some form of compassion as well. It's like, we appreciate you, and we appreciate you for reaching out and thinking of us, right? For you to even think about someone that you may not even know about, and have that cold call to say, you know what, I'm just gonna shoot my shot here, and then we'll hope for the best. The best is you get the acceptance, you get the interview, you get some good content, right? But also, it's like, at least he got back to you. Yeah. Some people, it's like you don't get the response. Yeah, and I gotten a few rejection emails, or regret emails, or letters, where it's like, we appreciate you for even thinking about us, and and we'll think about you later on down the line. But it's always good to get that back, because at least you got back to me.
Yeah. And I didn't expect that, right? Like, to me, there's no obligation, but I thought that was very well done by William Shatner's team. So we're talking about shots. So instead of hockey, I want to ask you a basketball related question because I know you played some basketball
Yes.
in college, right?
Yes.
So we'll think about those shots. I think I can say his name without making a mistake. Giannis Antetokounmpo,
Okay. Yes.
Milwaukee Bucks. They had the best record in the NBA, number one seed in the East, were upset in the first round of the playoffs, right? People were expecting they could maybe go win the championship. They lost in the first round. Did you see the video where post-game news conference, Giannis was asked, well, do you consider this season a failure? Did you see that?
Yes. Yes. I saw that. Yep. It went viral.
What was your reaction to what he said? Or the way I remember it, he basically said, and I encourage people, go find the video. It's not hard to find. My recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, Eli, basically said, well, there is no failure. Michael Jordan didn't win a championship every single year. Would you call those years a failure? We're building something here. We're gonna win. There is no failure in sports, I think was the pretty direct quote. What was your reaction to that?
I agree with him. He won before.
Mm-hmm.
He won a championship before, and you can consider this season a failure as well because of the way that they went out to Jimmy Butler, who's having a phenomenal season, and the Miami Heat.
Yeah.
But I agree with him when he said, you know what, you don't get promoted every single time. You don't have that promotion every single time. You have to go through that the aches and pains. You have to go through that growing pains to ultimately get what you want.
Yeah.
And he'd been through it before winning the championship the first time. He'll have to go through those processes again. And I agree 100%. You don't win every season. I think no player have ever won every single season. The only person that came close is Bill Russell. I think out of the 13 seasons,
Right.
he won 11. He won 11 championships out of 13 seasons, and he still lost. So Michael Jordan as well. He didn't win everything. He won 6 championships. Right when he got to that level, he didn't lose at that championship level. But every season he didn't went to the championship round. He had to go through Celtics. He had to go through the Pistons. He had to go through various avenues, retirement to get to that point. So I agree with Giannis when he said, you don't basically get promoted every day or every week. You have to go through that aches and pains and growing pains, and I agree 100%.
Yeah. So in the book, one thing you talk about is addressing and focusing on lessons learned from our failures. Do you have any tips to make sure that we're really focused on learning and that we can put aside disappointment or frustration or anger and make sure it doesn't turn into bitterness? How do we make sure rejection turns into something more positive?
I would say besides the writing the resume part, I would say keep a cool tally. Keep a cool tally of your losses or your rejections throughout the day. I always argue that if you are getting jabbed or you're getting punched in the face with a jab of failure, you're going to receive a power shot. So keep a tally every loss. Damn, I showed up late to work, or I showed up late to this podcast. Consider that a loss.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up late today. I don't feel too good. That you can consider those losses here.
Yeah.
You realize that throughout the day, you have accumulated much more losses than your wins. You're just so focused on winning, and that's one thing here. Just keep a cool tally of the losses here, and it will bring light to failing. It will bring light to failing here. You don't have to, and you realize once you realize that failing is not so difficult. You realize that you'll be all right. You'll be fine. But you have major losses as well, right? Recently, I've lost a family member. I lost my older brother passed away. My older brother passed away last year. It's all right. My older brother passed away last year, and I cope with it where I'm taking it one day at a time, and I take losses all the time here, and I just keep a cool tally, and I'll say, you know what, it's okay, you just laugh it off. You laugh it off, and you'll just push through, and you'll get your power shots in. At one day, you're playing defense, but you're gonna play offense one day, and that's where it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun where you're playing offense, and you're swinging back, and once you swing back, you'll get your hits as well. But just keep a cool tally. I always encourage readers to keep a cool tally of your losses throughout the day,
Mhm.
and then you will basically reciprocate that, and
Yeah.
not only reciprocate that, but flip that over to success as well.
Yeah. And I think you can do a similar thing with mistakes of just being mindful of I made a mistake. Like one thing I found to be helpful is to call it out, either to myself, to others around, or it's like, okay, my mistake. Okay, sorry. Okay, let's correct that. Let's move on. Like not to be dismissive or not to beat myself up, but just to acknowledge for what it is, I think is more helpful than being defensive or being in denial about it. And I think that can take some of the it can kind of normalize. I think it's similar to what you're saying. If we're aware of what's happening and we realize, okay, these things aren't killing us, we're living through it. Let's acknowledge it. Let's build upon it. Let's try to maybe use small mistakes or small failures to prevent the big ones. I think is an important thing to work toward.
I agree. I agree 100%. When it comes to like, filling in the blanks here, and this is another thing here we have to look at. We have to focus on the big picture here, right? Mm-hmm. I like to call it the domino effect. Mm-hmm. When we're looking at the domino effect, we have to place each and every domino in one successive order after the next, right? Once you knock them over, it basically boils down to the next domino here. And then if you're looking on the outside, you zoom out, you'll see a huge big picture here. But you're so focused on your day-to-day activities, right? Right, to do it every day. Direction is much more important than speed. Mm-hmm. That you're being blindsided to the fact that you're going to fail to succeed eventually. No one has ever won completely every single day, and people may argue Floyd Mayweather, he remained undefeated, or Rocky Marciano, but they lost as well. Because they don't tell you about the sparring sessions. They don't tell you about the fact that when Floyd Mayweather, he lost in the Olympics, right? And now, he lost during the amateurs. People lose all the time. And it's important to, obviously, we always want to remain undefeated, right? We always want to keep our O, but you're going to lose. You're going to lose. Yeah. It's okay. But the greatest that you can think of lost as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a Japanese expression that I love: fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Exactly.
So how do we bounce back from being knocked down, I guess, physically in a boxing ring, or knocked down by a mistake or rejection? Learning how to bounce back, get back up.
And it's also being gracious.
Yeah.
Yep. Being gracious about it too. I got knocked down. It's like I lost. Okay. And here's 2 things that can happen, right? As far as the reaction, you may not care about the reaction of others, right? And you can use it as motivation as well. But those who may have an adverse reaction to your failures, I bet you they won't be as brave enough to try what you just tried just now.
Yeah.
They won't be brave to try your way or to attempt it your way. So if they want to have the adverse reaction or to laugh at your pain or laugh at your failures here and point the finger, you can always respond by saying, have you tried what I'm trying? And if the answer is no, then there's nothing else for us to even talk about here, because I'm pretty sure if you failed, you wouldn't even be comfortable to even share that failure. Right. So that's how I look at it. I look at my failures that way, where I can just share it. And it's a form of motivation as well.
Yeah. And, the best way to never fail is to never really try anything new or anything at all, right? If you don't do anything, you can't fail. So if the goal is to never fail, that's not a path to success.
If I never tried anything, we will not be having this conversation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We will not be having this conversation. I would not be having a book. I would not have a brand based off of failures. We will not have mistakes here. If I never tried anything, if I was so focused on being undefeated or being so good at what I'm doing, I would never have a story.
Yeah.
I'll never have a story.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you have the story. I'm glad you're sharing it, Eli. One last question here. Going back to something that you had said. My mistake. I'm trying to find the quote. There it is. You talk about. Here's the quote. It might not be your fault, but you have to blame yourself. Tell us more about that idea.
So it's never your fault. It's never your fault that it's raining today, or it's never your fault that you woke up late, or you don't feel too good, right? Because it's never your fault. Some things you can't control. You can't control the inevitable, right? It's never your fault. Some things may not happen. You may have gotten pulled over, and it's okay. It's totally fine. Or some things happen. Things happen all the time.
Yeah.
However, you have to blame yourself because you must hold yourself accountable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it may not be my fault that things may not happen my way, or I failed 2 classes, back during my undergraduate career, but I have to blame myself because that's a starting point. That's a starting point for me to continue to move forward. And the only way that you can move forward is accepting your fault, not your fault, but accepting the blame or taking the blame for not succeeding. But that's the beginning. That's the beginning of you building and cultivating your career or your pathway back to redemption.
Yeah.
So that's basically how I felt when I said, with that quote, it may not be your fault, but you have to take blame for yourself because you need to hold yourself accountable to move forward.
Yeah. And that's one thing I appreciate of so many of the guests here on My Favorite Mistake. We're in a situation where everything involved in the situation might not have been their fault. There may have been other factors. But taking ownership for what you did, taking ownership for your decision, I admire that when people are willing to do that. It wasn't completely their fault, but they can only control their own actions. They can learn, and they can do things differently in the future to avoid repeating mistakes. I think that's powerful.
I agree 100%.
Well, Eli, I'm so glad that we could do the episode here today. Dr. Eli Joseph, the book title again, I encourage you to go check it out. Maybe can reading the book count as vaccination, or do people have to make their own mistakes and or have their own failures? I mean,
you have to make your own mistake. Now, what count is if you create your own rejection resume. That's what counts. If the readers create their own rejection resume, or the listeners can create their own rejection resume, that counts. That counts.
All right.
That's a good step forward.
I'm going to put one together. I'll share it along with this episode, I think. So Eli's book, again, is The Perfect Rejection Resume, A Reader's Guide to Building a Career Through Failure. I will put a link to the book, Eli's website, videos, all kinds of great stuff, articles he's written, articles about him, and the rejection resume. There's a lot more that you can learn from Eli, and we'll both encourage you, keep learning from your own mistakes, keep learning from your own rejections, right?
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much, Mark, for having me. I really appreciate you. And I'm glad we were able to do it now better late than never.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks again. I feel very accepted now, not rejected. Thanks.
Thank you so much.